I just ask everyone a question here? Who here thinks they have any rare earth metals or platinum group metals on you at the minute? Nobody? Didn't think so. Now, can I just ask a second question, or slightly rephrase that question? Who has a smartphone? All of you, as I thought. So, did you know that in those smartphones you have platinum group metals and rare earth metals? So every single person here who is carrying a smartphone, like we all do, is carrying platinum group metals and rare earth metals with you at all times. These metals underpin our current technological society, and we need them. We cannot function as a society without platinum and rare earth metals. So, as a society, we look on our planet in more and more environmentally damaging places. We're looking in the Arctic, we're looking in the rainforests, we're even mining under the sea for these metals, and that is causing untold damage to our planet, which, I should add, is the only planet currently that humanity can live on. But there is another way. We have to look elsewhere for these resources, and up until now, looking elsewhere has meant that we look in the Arctic, the Antarctic, wherever. But what if we look really elsewhere? Why don't we look up? Because these resources do not exist purely on Earth. They also exist in space. And fortunately for us, they exist in much higher quantities in space than they do on our planet. Because if the 20th century has taught us anything, it's that the Earth, which, I mean, we think the Earth is very, very big, but really the Earth is just a grain of sand floating in an endless sea of space. So why don't we go out there and look what's out there? So let me tell you about Project El Dorado. Project, for 500 years, humanity has looked for El Dorado, the mythical city of gold, and as of yet, we still haven't found it. However, what the Spanish conquistadors didn't realise is that El Dorado does exist. It's just not on Earth. Asteroids are our El Dorado. We know that asteroids contain platinum group metals in quantities which are unheard of on our planet. In fact, if you look on Earth where platinum mines are found, you will usually find them within the impact craters of asteroids. And the reason for this is simple. Platinum is a very dense, heavy metal, and during the formation of our Earth, it sank deep into the crust. However, in space, on an asteroid, we do not have these problems because they are the building blocks of the solar system. So let me just give you some figures here to kind of quantify what I'm talking about. When you're looking at an asteroid, a 1 kilometre diameter asteroid of a metallic composition, and just to give you a bit of show and tell here, a metallic composition asteroid would look something like this. It's a very, very small meteorite, but this here, imagine this on a kilometre scale. That would contain 100,000 tonnes of platinum within a single 1 kilometre diameter asteroid. It would contain 10,000 tonnes of gold. That is more platinum and gold in a single asteroid than has ever been mined in the history of our planet. And to give you an idea of what that would be valued at using current market prices, we can reasonably expect a 1 kilometre diameter metallic asteroid to be worth £9.155 trillion. I'm not quite sure what the current exchange rate is, but that's roughly 10 trillion euros. So we realise that these resources are very valuable, and we realise that the applications of them are ubiquitous in our society. But also we realise that we're talking about something which is much more valuable than just pure profit. Because, okay, we live in a capitalist society, but ultimately what we're looking to do is to really expand our society beyond our planet. And this is something that we've been looking to do for 50 years, because it's been 50 years since man first set foot in the moon, but it's been 47 years since we last set foot in the moon. There is a huge solar system out there that is waiting for us to go and exploit the resources of it. There is 18,000 near-Earth asteroids, and there are over 4 million main belt asteroids. So we are talking about resources for our society to grow, not just for centuries, but for millennium. And then beyond that, once we've understood the resources of the solar system, and we've conquered our solar system, perhaps we can even go further. So how do we get into that exciting tomorrow, which we're all trying to get to? Well, at Asteroid Mining Corporation, we take quite a simple approach considering the relative technical complexity of our project. We first have to know what we're looking at. So this is prospecting, and for the past 3 years we've been developing the Asteroid Prospecting Satellite 1, which is due for launch in 2021. And what Asteroid Prospecting Satellite will do is we'll go into a low Earth orbit 800 kilometres above our planet, and it will just look out at the solar system with the sun behind it, and it will just look at these asteroids, because we already know where they are, but we don't know what they're made of. And unless you know what an asteroid is made of, you can't possibly turn around and say this is going to be justifiable to go and mine. But as soon as you know that this asteroid is a metallic composition, as soon as you know that it has the spectral features which detect platinum composition, then all of a sudden you see a big change in the methodology for what we're trying to do. Because once you see platinum within an asteroid, all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where these resources, which are so scarce on Earth, are abundant within our solar system. These are resources which we can absolutely depend on. I mean, Casper there was talking about ruthenium being incredibly expensive and impractical for using scientific experiments upon. What if it was abundant? What if it was just as abundant as aluminium is? And there is a historical parallel here. In 1855, Emperor Napoleon III gave Queen Victoria a state gift, which was a watch made of pure aluminium. It was such a prized metal in the 1850s that it was worthy of being given to a queen, and now it's in every Coke can in the planet. Just because the value, or just because the cost of a resource comes down, doesn't mean that we can't find more value and more application for these resources. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do at the Asteroid Mining Corporation, is to unlock these resources which are scarce on Earth but are abundant within the solar system. And once we know where these resources are, then ultimately there's a question which has to be said. Now that we know that resources are abundant within the solar system, who's going to own them? Who's going to unlock these resources, and what is that going to look like? Which is where the second phase of our project comes in. The Asteroid Exploration Probe 1 will take the data from the first mission, and ultimately what we're looking to do is to say, okay, we know asteroid X over there, we know that that contains platinum, we know it's 1 kilometre in diameter, and we know it has an approximate valuation of 10 trillion. So let's send a mission up to that and let's explore it up close. Let's look at the surface features of this asteroid and validate our methodology. Let's say that this asteroid, we know the composition, we know the surface features, and we know where the mining sites are. Once we've done that, and as part of that, by doing that very act, that will be how you essentially get the license for the property rights over that asteroid. Because space is a global commons. Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty says that space belongs to all of us, but at the same time, it belongs to nobody. It's the Wild West out there, and someone has to be brave enough to go and say, we're going to do this. Governments can't do that, but private companies can, and this is the strange legal loophole we find ourselves in now. But that allows us to essentially go and say, these are our resources, these are what we are recovering, and we're talking about wealth creation on a scale unseen in human history, because there are so many asteroids and there are so many resources within those asteroids that I possibly cannot comprehend how much these resources are worth at the minute. We are essentially at the beginning of a new era in human history. We are Christopher Columbus setting foot for the new world, realising that there's something to be there, but not really knowing what it is, and not knowing what ultimately it's going to look like. And that's a scary thing to be, but ultimately it's very exciting as well, because it's ours, it's there for all of us, and it's there if we want to get it. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to mine asteroids, we're trying to take these resources, but we don't just do this for pure capitalism. It's about expanding, it's about taking our society further and really pushing the limits of what it is to be a human, not just an Earthian, but a citizen of a solar system, because that's what we are. If you can make that jump in your head from the Earth being the solar system centre to the Sun being the centre of the solar system, then it becomes a lot easier to imagine the asteroids, to imagine the planets, and to go, why aren't we there? Why aren't humans on Mars right now? Why don't we have anyone living in the moon? These are questions that ultimately we will be addressing over the next 10-20 years, and if the space agencies have anything to do with it, we'll have a village on the moon by 2030. There has to be an economic incentive for that, and that incentive is resources. But those resources will allow us to expand further and further into the solar system, and will allow us to really understand these existential questions about what it is we are as a species. Are we to be limited to this one planet, or are we going to grow and expand like we've always done? And there is also, I suppose, a very deep existential question here when it comes to asteroids, because I don't know if you're aware of this, but today is in fact Asteroid Day, which is probably one of my favourite public holidays. So, and in fact, also coincidentally, yesterday an asteroid hit Puerto Rico. It was only the size of a car, but this does go to say that asteroids are an existential threat to humanity. There's a great joke that I like to say, that if the dinosaurs had a space agency, they'd probably still be here today. We do have space industries, and we have the technology now to go and to start manipulating asteroids, to move them, to change their orbits, and to one day, quite soon, say for certain that these resources will never... That's the thing, I call them resources, I don't even consider them a threat. I had a Freudian slip there. But in my head they're resources, but they are a threat. So these asteroids, they will threaten us. They are one of our biggest existential challenges, but they're one of our biggest opportunities. And really, the reason that I did this entire company of mine, the reason I set up Asteroid Mining Corporation, was because I have a deep personal conviction, which I hold to be true, and that is that if you want to do something, and I mean, if you really, really want to do something, you can't wait to be asked, and you can't seek permission. Whatever it is, you have to start now, today, because the future's not going to wait for you. And I want to be the first man to set foot on an asteroid, so I need to start thinking about that future today.
I'm sure we have a lot of questions. Who want to start? Est-ce que vous pouvez passer le micro juste derrière, merci. Parlez bien dans le micro parce qu'on m'a dit à la technique qu'on n'entendait pas très bien. C'est juste derrière.
Hey, thank you very much. Just might be a simple question, but I'm guessing that catching an asteroid might be something more complicated than catching a butterfly. So how exactly do you manage to get on it and mine it, or I mean, how does this work? Thanks.
Well, the technology for catching asteroids, or rendezvousing as we use in the industry, is already established. So at the minute there are 2 missions which are either on an asteroid or are on their way to an asteroid. So Hayabusa 2, the Japanese Space Agency mission, is currently surveying, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but, Ryugu, sorry. So asteroid Ryugu, an asteroid in our solar system, about several hundred million kilometres away, currently has a Japanese space probe on it, which is just doing the exact same kind of mission that we'd be looking to do for phase 2. But when you're talking about capturing an asteroid, it's not really what we're trying to do, because regulators get very nervous if you start talking about moving asteroids, because I'm sure most of us have seen Armageddon, and Bruce Willis isn't really the kind of frontman that we'd want for this business. What we're more talking about is being able to recover materials from those asteroids. We're going to go, we'll land on an asteroid, and we're developing space drilling technology with the University of Glasgow at the minute, which will just essentially be a big drill, lands on the asteroid, recovers 20 tonnes of material, takes off again and comes back to Earth. And when you're talking about an asteroid which is perhaps 10 million tonnes worth, it's not going to make a particular dent. But if you can recover 20 tonnes of platinum, then that is worth $1 billion euros, essentially. So there's a lot of money to be made from just such small-scale missions. And then once you've done that, the infrastructure is developed, and then we can start looking at more and more and more.
And you do look like Bruce, except for the hair.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Pour Guy Philippe, devant.
Absolutely fascinating. One question to you, which is more actually a kind of a business model question. You mentioned old stuff like the aluminum watch. Actually, in the 16th and 17th century, a high-value document was actually the old seafaring trades all through those continents, which are still slightly uncharted. I forgot there's a name for that, carton, I think. Like. So I want actually for you, where do you see, it's a really business model question, where do you see at the end of the day the most value for you? Is it actually mining, or is it actually making sort of a Google of all those different objects and trying to provide to the ones who are going to go and take their shelves and take the stuff out there, provide the right information that then you can sell at the right price?
Well, there's a historical analogy here, and in 1848 at Sutter's Creek in California, right before the California Gold Rush kicked off, someone found gold in a river, and they went, gold, gold in the California River, and that cry echoed throughout the world, and within a year there were 100,000 people living in San Francisco. But do you know, there's a great joke about that. Do you know who made the most money in the California Gold Rush? It wasn't the miners. It was the people who sold the miners the shovels. If you provide the tools for other people to go and do their own work, then you can essentially make money regardless. And that's where our three-phase approach comes in. What we're looking to do with the Asteroid Prospecting Satellite 1 is to understand the resources of the solar system and to provide the world with the tools to go and exploit these resources, because there is a lot of them. We're not looking to monopolise space because it would take a very long time and a lot of effort. But by being able to provide a sustainable revenue stream purely based upon data, that will allow us to then have an economic base to then go and sort of fund the much harder, more complex and technical missions for the covering material.
Yeah, thank you. I have a legal question. So from my understanding, you cannot actually own bodies in space, but you can own the resources that you might extract from it. So I'm just thinking, like, how does isn't there some kind of free riding problem, or how do you actually capture, or how do you actually obtain exclusivity over the mining of a particular territory when you actually cannot own that territory?
That is a question of jurisdiction more than anything else. So at the minute in the United Kingdom, if I wanted to apply for a licence to do exploration of the resources of an asteroid, the UK Space Agency would just say, no, there's no way, it's not happening. But if I was based in Luxembourg, just down the road, they would go, yes, of course, come here, set up a company in Luxembourg, here's some money, here's your legal regime, and yeah, go ahead, here's a licence. Once you've done your early sort of prospecting work, here's your licence. You now have exclusivity for a period of perhaps 10, 15, 20 years over the resources in that asteroid. And then that is where things get really interesting, because under international law, Luxembourg and the United States, and soon to be Germany by the looks of things, have been slightly cheeky. They've just went, okay, we're just going to do this. Can't really stop us, we're sovereign states. What are you going to do? And really, I think it took that sort of legal jump to say, okay, someone's going to do it. We'll provide you with the tools, we'll provide you with the regulatory benefits to say, here you go, this is it, crack on. I mean, Luxembourg is smaller than Edinburgh, where I'm from, so I think it took that kind of jump for Luxembourg to say, all right, here we go. But ultimately, you will get sort of that jurisdiction there.
You get actually the problem indeed that if you have multiple jurisdictions that actually provide the license over the same territory because they don't recognize each other, then you just have like multiple company on the same spot.
Yeah, but this is where sort of the international legal framework comes in. So I'm a member of an organisation called the Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group, which is the mouthiest title that I know. And basically what this organisation does is to basically iron out these kind of problems, because we're at the beginning of the sector. It's the very, very early days. But what we're looking to avoid is situations like that where you have two companies in competition with one another within the same space. So as part of that, by having this national legislation, there's also a drive towards an international treaty on space resources, essentially. And what we're looking to do with that is to sort of iron out these legal questions, because, okay, Luxembourg might provide us with a licence, but then a Russian company might get a licence off a Russian company to get the same licence. It really comes down to who applies to the United Nations Office for the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space first. And if the UNOSA were to turn around and say, okay, Luxembourg supplied the licence application first, they get the rights, then essentially that would be sort of first come, first serve.
Sorry, then you should claim the sun first.
We will need an enforcement agency for this space.
Nobody can claim the sun, but there's resources within the asteroids that would be valuable.
There's other questions. Thank you.
So,
qu'il y a deux autres questions derrière.
so I understand that you're not necessarily going to do the space mission yourself, but there are other companies which can do it for you. I mean, with the information you have for them.
Yeah.
Which companies are you talking about? And when do you believe they're going to bring back the first gram and the first kilogram for an industrial use in the future?
Well, I mean, at the minute we're developing the prospecting satellite to have that data infrastructure, and we're looking to have that in place by 2021. But really, once we have that data infrastructure, we'll then be applying for licenses ourselves based upon that data. And then once we own at least a single license to an asteroid, then all of a sudden you have property rights over an asteroid, which may be worth 10 trillion, 20 trillion, who knows. As soon as you have that, then we look to essentially flip our business model from being a pure data company to a mining exploration company. And there is precedent for this in the mining industry currently. There's lots of junior mining companies who do the early foundational work to identify a mining site and then own the license and then turn around to a company like Anglo American Platinum and say, we own 18,000 square kilometres of Greenland, we know these resources are here in these quantities, would you like to buy it off us for 5 billion euros plus 5% net smelter return? And then that's your upfront cash payment, but that 5% also turns around and says, if everything that is coming out of that mine, Asteroid Mining Corporation or whoever, would get 5%. So that allows you to have a continual revenue stream as a result of that, even if you're not actually the people who are going in mining yourself.
And how are you funding in the meantime?
Personally, so we have academic grants, we have Scottish Government money, and I've funded the rest of it myself. So developing satellites isn't as expensive. Manufacturing and launching satellites is slightly more expensive, and if anyone would like to chat to me about that, I'm all ears.
It's not a question, just a little remark, you know. In France, we have invented everything before of anybody else in the planet. In 1941, if I remember, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry wrote Le Petit Prince. And in Le Petit Prince, there is a businessman who bought all the asteroids of the planet. So you'll have to pay us royalties for that. Congratulations.
Hello, I'm sorry, I'm very bad at science. And so it's probably a silly question, but would it change the solar system equilibrium in a long-term period? I really don't know.
Oh no. So ultimately, because there's so much mass within these objects, you're talking about sort of asteroids which are hundreds of tons or thousands of millions of tons. Taking 100 tons or 200 tons off of an asteroid isn't going to change its orbit at all. When you start talking, I mean, just to give you an example, 200 tons of mass of just solar dust falls on our planet every single day. So, I mean, the solar system is big in a scale that we can barely comprehend. And sort of the amount that human influence and human interaction will be able to do isn't going to change anything for millennia at the very least.